All right, Bruce, we are recording once again, trying to make some sense in a senseless world. Right? Sound good? Does that make sense?
Well, we're trying to make sense. That's the key.
Trying to make sense and get a listener or two out there. So anyway, another article that appeared recently, which is really interesting. And the headline of it is, some CEOs suggest dropping degree requirements in hiring. So, this is interesting. A couple of lead-in sentences. Millions of jobs requiring a 4-year college degree can be done without the level of education, some corporate leaders say. To address inequalities in business and society, some executives suggest that companies shake up their approach to hiring and consider unconventional candidates. That's a weird phrase, unconventional candidates. Then it goes on to say, Black Americans in particular are often left unprepared by the US education system, and companies should help by hiring workers without a degree and giving them training. This comes primarily from CEO of Merck, Kenneth Frazier, when he was speaking at a CEO Council summit recently. And I know I've got some thoughts on that whole thing in terms of how I react to it, but let me bounce it to you first in terms of how does this smell to you?
Well, I think back to our Cigna days to start off, and some of my best employees were people that started out, first of all, they didn't have college degrees, they had high school degrees. Mm-hmm. They understood the culture, they worked hard, and they were loyalists. They really, every day they came in, they wanted to do right by Cigna. Mm-hmm. And so if you can build more people like that, in reading that article, that was, more about corporations responsible for lifting up those that have been left behind. Mm-hmm. And I don't disagree with that, but I think that the rationale behind it is all wrong. I think the rationale should be creating great employees that are immersed in your culture, that are loyal to you. I mean, the data is what? This Generation Z are going to have 10 jobs by the time they're 40. There's some ridiculous number.
Right.
So, I mean, so if you're going to bring people in, train them, and then have them leave, that's not cost effective. But if you bring people in that only have a high school education and train them in jobs and in your culture and your brand, that's a great thing. Now, you also have to then find the managers that are capable of doing that.
Well, that's a whole other thing too. But I find it interesting that they're actually saying this because it's an obvious point. For once, some of these executives are actually making some kind of common sense, as opposed to floating out in the clouds somewhere and venturing into turf that they know hardly anything about. So you want to have social justice, you want to have more equality and equity. Look inside, and I think that's what Frazier's saying. Now there may be another financial agenda to this, which we'll get to in a moment. But to your point. And we'll pick on Cigna again, because that's where we had a lot of common ground. And this is probably true in a lot of these companies. I remember they would have the folks in the service centers who were primarily minorities, Black and Hispanic, who were handling some of the toughest calls from customers. So in essence, what you did is you had a population of people that, to your point, understood the culture better, understood the products better, understood even the distribution channels better than anybody else in that company, than all the MBAs and Harvard MBAs that we have that were there. And when actually an idea was proposed to groom some of these people and bring them up, maybe put a number on it, maybe 15% of your people that you put through training, it went over like a dead balloon. Yes. So went over, and by the way, it went over by a dead balloon among minority executives as well.
Yes.
It wasn't like gray-haired white men who were sitting like this and saying, I don't want to do this, It's a very strange thing. And so there's like something else that's cooking here. We talk so much about racism it's really like elitism going on, because these executive chambers had a lot of people with different, that look different, complexions, so to speak, but all coming out of the same schools, saying the same kind of buzzwords, and basically playing the same kind of game with the same kind of rewards. And I don't know how that really brought any really true diverse perspective. But now I'm kind of getting off on a tangent, I guess. Pregnant pause.
Forget the tangent for a sec. The premise here about hiring people that don't necessarily have a college education or a master's or a PhD, and the idea that there are lots of jobs out there that these people are potentially very good at, or certainly can quickly grow the skills necessary to do effectively. You know, you were talking about other issues. There's a cost factor here. Labor costs are going up.
Yeah.
Okay. The other factor that is a little shocking in this to me is I've always been taught that education is the silver bullet for inequality.
Yeah.
And this doesn't fly in the face of that, but it says where that education should be gotten, or because you missed that opportunity earlier in your life doesn't mean we should write you off for a lifetime. Let's be kind and say that.
Yeah.
But this is to me, this is a great idea because it could better control labor costs. You can build people that are of your brand. Mm-hmm. Now, recruiting becomes a really different thing. It almost becomes like the NFL draft. You have to decide what skill sets you're going to be looking for if it's not just basic education. Is it the ability to learn? Is it the ability to think? How are you going to test and find those answers among this pool of people? It opens up a host of other questions. But to me, it's a great idea because it engages more people at a time where population is not growing as fast.
Right.
It gives them upward mobility, which was, the middle class's upward mobility drove the economy for 50 to 80 years in this country. I mean, there's lots of good things here. And as brand and marketing people, this makes a heck of a lot of sense.
Yeah, well, you know what the real challenge is that because you were starting to hit on it a little bit, because the way the infrastructure of these companies would not be conducive to this. The CEO can say it, but think about an HR department. They'd be lost. I mean, it's an odd statement because they should know all their employees like the back of their hand. They just have a really great internal network for this stuff. But when there's openings at a variety of different levels, who do they go to? Same old recruitment firms who are going to go to the same old lists. And they're also going to have different recruitment firms that will say, well, we have access to the great diverse candidates and so forth. But I'll go back to what I was saying earlier. Yeah, but it's a qualified statement. Yeah, it's not really the people that really understand your business, that understand your customers as well. So that ability to have that inward look and to be able to really recruit inside, as opposed to this constant looking for some kind of magic formula from people on the outside would be a big challenge. And yeah, there would be certainly a cost benefit, but I think I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt here that I don't think this is so much of just a financial one. That might be sort of a secondary benefit. But I think some of these CEOs that are really earnest about, especially those CEOs that have come up through what I'll call a blocked pipeline to success,
right,
are now looking inward to say, what are those structures that keep rewarding the same old, but what are those structures that need to look for new ways of thinking and new ways of growing talent? And
couldn't agree more. But what's old is, this is an example of what's old is new again.
Exactly.
As well.
Yeah.
How many people, when I first started working, all the senior management teams that I encountered always talked about how they started in the mailroom.
Yeah. Ad agency business.
ad agency, even at some of my clients,
Okay.
they started at really low-level positions. In some cases, they had limited education, but they went back and got more and continued to grow. But the idea that you work your way up and it's a meritocracy and how you grow and think, and that these organizations were actually had a philosophy of bringing people in and growing them.
They did.
And then people became highly mobile, and companies said, well, companies stopped being loyal, so employees stopped being loyal.
Yeah.
You can argue about which was the chicken and which was the egg and what came first.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, now we've got this thing where people, in many cases, are just hopping around to jump up and grow their income
Yeah.
as quickly as they can. And because of ambition, now you've got a situation where that's not necessarily healthy for companies.
Well,
And this is a potential, this seems, we always say, does this make sense? If you put some things in place, I think this makes a boatload of sense. It doesn't make education not a silver bullet. It's just where they're getting that education and where that opportunity for growth comes.
well, exactly. But I think,
And
go ahead.
now it also comes, this discussion comes at a very bad time for, colleges and universities that are struggling financially, and the cost of which is going up,
Too bad.
and people, this just reinforces, is there real value there?
Exactly right. Because I was just writing down in my margins
But
indictment of education, because it really comes down to,
I wouldn't trade my college experience for anything.
yeah, but I wouldn't either. But we went that during a different time.
Yep.
Completely different time. And we learned from far more balanced people. And what a lot of the executives, and it may be not being published that much, that they're having some real challenges with, is our kids coming out of these schools with the ability to actually do some real critical thinking. And some of what I even observed from some of the work that I've done, I don't want to go into too much detail on this one, I would attest to that. It's very, very different. Desire for rewards real quickly, a lot more of a sense of entitlement, and not that sense of, well, I have to really work hard for that next achievement. Coming out with preconceived opinions and notions of things, which seems to be pretty dangerous. So yeah, I think it's a statement about the education system overall. I think hopefully they, like any other industry, should be shaken up and do something about it. When you think about what it costs, you want to talk about inequities. Certain populations are able to pay 40, 50, 60 grand per year to actually, or more to go through this, to then get accepted into some of these companies and whatnot. I mean, give me a freaking break. That's an obvious issue of where some things are broken down that need to be dealt with. And in this little statement here, if he's serious about it, and I don't know him, but I guess he probably pretty much is, they really should embark on that. That would give the education system a little bit of a run for its money, and maybe start equalizing some of this stuff and getting it back to what their core value is. Teach young folks how to think critically, not to be critics.
Great way to end it.
All right.
Great way to end it. Right
Otherwise,
there.
I'm going to start yelling, and it's going to be bringing out the inner Paulie Walnuts in me. I don't want that to happen. All right, Bruce. Have a great
day.
All right, you too.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye, buddy.